Welcome, everyone, to my Oscars 2024 ranking. So, this means that I'm talking about the Oscars that took place in 2024, but these movies all came out in 2023. If you saw my last one, you know what the gist is. Okay, so this is my Oscar ranking for this year. As I'm recording this in 2024, it is still the most recent Oscars. I did this for the first time last year, and I wanted to do it again this year. I watched every movie nominated for Best Picture and Best Animated Film, and I ranked them. So I know if you saw my last video or my last one about the Oscars from 2023, you know that I didn't watch everything nominated for Best Picture that year, but I actually did this year. Um, so I will warn all of you that sometimes I write with the expectation that you have seen the movie, and sometimes I explain the movie. I'm not really consistent with that. I don't really know why I did that, but I just am apologizing in advance if you don't understand everything that I'm saying if you haven't seen these movies. Um, so, unfortunately, a movie that is not on here is the animated movie Robot Dreams. That is because I cannot watch it anywhere, not even pirating. I know that at the current moment, I can watch it. I just haven't, and I'm sorry. I know it was out. I know it's out. I haven't seen it. I'm sorry. I've heard it's good. I'm sorry. Okay. So I threw in some extra movies that I believe should be nominated for Best Picture that weren't, or not necessarily that, but sometimes were nominated in other categories. All the movies that I include on here were nominated for some kind of Oscar, even if it wasn't Best Picture, but I do include all the Best Picture nominees. I will start with the best animated category and then best picture. So opposite of last year, I don't know why I did that. So brevity isn't my strong suit. In my last one, I said that I was going to try to keep it short for all those. So I only had one slide for a lot of those movies. That is no longer the case here, as I have continued to do more PowerPoints. I have become less brief pretty much every time. So yeah. Okay, so my least favorite animated movie that I watched of the animated movie list was Nimona, which I know is a hot take. I'm sorry. Nimona was actually pretty disappointing for me. I really don't have that much to say about this movie because it left no impression on me. I thought it was really cliche. Every story beat felt like something I'd seen before. It had moments where it was cute, but overall, I was not really into it. Nimona herself was more annoying than charming. There's a shark dance break scene that felt like very 2012. Most of the humor didn't hit with me. I think if I was a 14-year-old tomboy, I would have had my mind blown by this movie. So I don't really think it's bad. It's just not for me. I'm glad it works for some people, but it just doesn't work for me. The animation was pretty cool, though. I will say that I've read the graphic novel for this, and I read the graphic novel when I wasn't a tomboy, but when I was 14. And I really liked it. So I think maybe the graphic novel hit me at the right age, but I might have been a little too old to enjoy the movie. I don't know. I've seen a lot of people my age who really like the movie. It just didn't work for me. Okay, so number three was Elemental. Now, I knew going into Elemental that the racism metaphor wasn't going to work. But actually, watching the movie showed me how bad it really was. The whole reason that these metaphors don't work is because they rely on the physical differences between the elements to show why they don't like each other, when those differences don't exist in real life, obviously. That's the whole reason why racism is bad, because there's no difference between Korean people and white people. Also, good God, do I hate this animation. Truly one of my least favorite styles that I have ever seen. Why is it that when Pixar slash Disney experiments with art style, it looks unfinished and clunky? Which, by the way, I'm taking a dig at Wish there. But the textures look really great if it's not on the characters. I really liked the way that the rest of the world looked, but just the characters, like, she looks unfinished. I don't like it. Okay, the one thing that I will say that's nice about this movie is that the story of the fire girl wanting to make her parents proud and the conflict between her wanting to be her own person and making her dad proud is actually kind of good. It's not anything groundbreaking, but it is well done. You can tell that whoever wrote this movie was a child of immigrants. Her parents have the shop, and it's expected of her to take over since her dad is starting to get too sick. And then she realizes that she might not want to do that, but she feels a ton of guilt over that. And she's got this relationship with a water, who's white, guy who her parents won't approve of. And she has these moments with the water guy on the beach where she tells him how much her parents went through to move and how hard they worked to make the store. And she says, "How do I repay a sacrifice that big? And honestly, that line is pretty raw. I think this connected with me the most because I'm friends with so many children of immigrants, and I've seen this conflict before play out many times in real life. However, I didn't like the beginning of this movie at all, and when it got more into the immigrant story with her parents and their parents, it was actually kind of good. The romance element is still not good, and there were a lot of cliches, but it isn't exactly what I would call a good movie. But I was expecting a truly horrible movie, and this wasn't horrible. I think because I expected this movie to be so bad that it made me like it more than if I was going into it expecting Pixar's usual quality. This is by no means as good as a regular Pixar movie. Pixar has fallen very far, but I'm glad I saw it, which is a very surprising thing for me to say. One thing about Elemental that's weird is I honestly wish it wasn't animated, which is a sentence I don't think I've ever said in my life. But the very adult and real conflict that Ember faces is really compelling and probably would have worked great in a movie that focuses more on that and less on this really weird racism metaphor. Okay, number two was Across the Spider Verse. I loved Across the Spider Verse. I went and saw this movie twice in theaters by myself just because I wanted to see it again. I absolutely loved the animation in this movie, which, duh, but it still feels worthy noting. It's really beautiful made. The story is fantastic. The writing is superb. I loved how good the character writing in this movie is. Each character has so much charisma and personality. They all felt really distinct. Most of the characters in this movie are Spider-Man, and yet they are all really unique and wonderful. I love the Spot and Miguel as villains. Both of them were used really well in this movie. Controversial opinion, I might like this one better than the first one. I will accept criticism on that because I realize that's kind of crazy. Another controversial opinion is that I want the third movie to take its time. I want them to release it when they are done and not to rush something out. This movie was really good. I will say that this movie would have been number one if it came out in any other year except for this one. And the number one animated movie was The Boy and the Heron. I have quite a lot to say about this one, so buckle in. I'm going to go into some analysis here because I have a lot to say and nowhere to put it. The Boy and the Heron is Miyazaki's reflective movie about Miyazaki's life perspective. He took his knowledge and life experiences and made a movie that has central ideas around grief, loss, love, forgetting, and legacy. It is sad that a movie at the end of an incredibly influential man's career has a theme that forgetting is okay. His movies will be remembered for long after his death, but at the same time, he knows that he will still be forgotten and is okay with it. He is using this movie to talk about the death of those around us is normal, but the love that we experience is worth it every time. And that loss should not prevent us from finding connections in those around us. This feels like a movie that someone only near the end of their life can make because it's reflective about so many periods of their life. This movie is not quite as focused on the plot as it is on what characters feel and about what is going on around them, which makes a plot summary kind of difficult to make. Mahito is the main character here. She is killed in a fire at the hospital that she works at the beginning of the movie. A year later, Mahito and his father moved to the countryside of Japan to avoid the bombings of World War II. His father has married his mother's younger sister and is moving to her house to build their life together. This sounds super scummy, but the movie doesn't want you to think about it that way. The Mahito feels a lot of anger and guilt still over his mother's death, causing him to act out in school. His stepmom becomes pregnant and disappears to this abandoned building on the property, and Mahito follows her to save her. This leads him to a magical world that is full of abstract ideas and creatures, more along the lines of what Miyazaki is known for. Through this magical world, Mahito is able to process the death of his mother and accept his aunt as his new stepmother, and even change how he feels about his father. There's a lot that is unsaid or told in an abstract way to show how the characters feel about their situations in life, but every symbol and metaphor feels extremely intentional and very layered, which I loved. This isn't a movie that you were expected to understand everything that happened on a first watch, and which I am perfectly okay with. Every time I watch this movie, I find some new ideas. This movie is really incredibly smart and very beautiful. This is genuinely one of my favorites from Studio Ghibli, and I have seen every movie that they've done. Mahito and his mother are shown as children when we first see them, a demographic that Miyazaki is familiar with making stories around. Characters who are in their 30s, like Kiriko, and people who are old and reflecting on their lives, like the Tower Master. I don't know where I was going with that sentence, but what I meant to say is that we see them as children, but also other demographics that Miyazaki isn't necessarily known for doing. Okay, there it is. As I watched this movie with Penelope, and she said that it felt like a found family, she's right. Mahito and his dad and his stepmom start the movie very separate from each other, and Mahito spends most of the movie looking to his stepmom looking for his stepmom, which allows him to connect with her and realize that he does want her in his life. And that even though Mahito's dad is not in the other world with Mahito and his stepmom, both of their own arcs of growth allow them to connect with him when they get back. Mahito gets to meet his mom when she is his age, and he learns to love her as a person and not just as his mother, which allows him to accept her death and move on, which I just love. She gets to save him from drowning in his grief and then lets him go, all while getting to know him as a person. Mahito wants to connect with those around him by opening up to Kiriko, one of the old maids who he meets when she's in her 20s, and she gets to teach him aspects of this world and also take care of him. He truly comes of age by getting to know the women that are most important in his life. They get to love him on their own terms, and he gets to know them without the pressure of or expectation of real life. He learns and grows by these women showing him their love. He takes their love and uses it to grow and to be able to love his family much more completely. Towards the end of the movie, Mahito is given the option to have power and influence, taking over control of this other world from as his great granduncle dies, and he says no. He wants to get to know that his stepmom, his dad, and his new brother. I've seen people say that Miyazaki is really sad that his son can't make good movies, but I really do not get that idea from this movie at all. Mahito rejects his legacy, and it is not seen as a bad thing. In fact, it is the right decision. He is not burdened with the decision of his great granduncle, and that is a good thing. He makes his own decision about what matters the most to him. He is offered power and influence, but chooses to leave that world with his aunt slash stepmom so that he can join his dad. This movie is one that made me think quite a lot and is such an inventive and unique story. Coming of age stories are as old as time, but this one is executed in such a unique and new way to look at life from this lens, and is one that feels like it can only come from someone with the perspective of a near complete life. I need to see this movie again and pick up more of the ideas that I'm sure I didn't pick up on, but after my first viewing, I'm left with these feelings of love and loss and how we quietly change from experiences with those closest to us. And also, media about moms just hit different. It always does. This is a movie that has so much to say about the human experience and so many themes and ideas packed into it that I feel like even with a second watch under my belt, I am forgetting some of the ideas that I had. I need to watch this movie when it streams so I can pause and take notes. I haven't done that. I need to, though. I saw this movie twice in theaters, but I do definitely need to watch it again. As an example of how layered and deep this movie is, after I watched this movie with Claire, we had different ideas over what Mahito hitting himself in the head with the rock meant. I had two ideas. The movie tells us that it represents his malice, but we didn't think that it was that straightforward. I thought that maybe he was punishing his dad for making him move and show up to the new school in the car, which makes him stand out from everyone else than he already would have. He's punishing his dad by making it seem like the new school is bad for him. I also thought that it could represent his relationship with grief over the death of his mother. When he hits himself, the grief that he feels is overflowing, which is why a small head wound bleeds so much. Then, as the movie progresses, his wound begins to heal, representing his inner healing as well. Claire says that she thinks that he did it so that he could get out of school to explore the estate and figure out what the Grey Heron was up to, which I think is really cool that this one event has three different interpretations and all of them could be true. It's so beautiful. It's really well made. It has so much to say about life, which I just really love. Okay, now we are on to the Best Picture nominations. And I'd like to note that I think that the top 10 movies here are better than any of the movies nominated last year. The only ones from last year that are on this level are Banshees of Inisherin and Everything Everywhere All at Once. I don't know why I messed up that acronym, but seriously, this was a crazy good year for movies. A common sense sentence that you will see me write here is that I liked the movie better than I thought it would, which is a nice change of pace after the past couple years of general shit. I didn't really watch any of the movies that was nominated in 2020 or 2021, or really 2022. COVID really did a number on movies, which everyone knows, but yeah. My least favorite movie that was nominated for Best Picture was Maestro. Maestro has beautiful cinematography. I do not like the black and white that is used here because it really feels like it contributes nothing. Oh, wow, this movie takes place in the 40s and 50s, so it's shot in black and white. Innovative. However, the black and white is beautiful. I'll give him that. There's a shot where Carey Mulligan shines bright white against Leonard Bernstein's shadow. As subtle as a sledgehammer, but a beautiful shot. Do you think that maybe Carey Mulligan feels trapped in Bradley Cooper's shadow? I know I'm reaching. Whoa. Yeah. There is a scene at their summer house, and the lighting is really wonderful. When it moves to color, the way that movies are shot and composed is also really beautiful. The shots throughout this movie are made and composed very well in a way that draws your attention to it. The music in this movie is great, of course. The writing is far less good. It is difficult to follow at times, which is very odd. It's like people are making jokes that I'm not in on. It's not funny at all. It's like trying to jump into the middle of a conversation with a friend group who have known each other for 10 years. It's difficult to describe what makes the writing off in a way that really encapsulates how it's off. People are always talking over each other, but in a way that's not natural. The way people talk to each other is just off. I don't know. The acting is a mixed bag. Bradley Cooper isn't very good. I'm always aware that he's playing someone. He sounds like he has a cold the whole time. He never feels like a real person. Carrie Mulligan isn't great, but she's far better than him. Her argument with Lenny on Thanksgiving is strange because it's her airing all of her grievances with Lenny, and she has a lot to say, but the audience hasn't really seen anything that she's talking about. We've only seen him cheat on her, but we don't see the flaws of character that she's pointing out. But despite all that, this movie's main flaw is that it doesn't have anything to say. It doesn't have anything to say about relationships, about music, about being an artist, about being gay. It shows things without ever looking more into it. Bradley Cooper's scene that he trained for 6 years to conduct was simply a long scene for him to show off what he'd learned. It didn't add anything or change the story or say anything about the characters. Everything in this movie is just really shallow. Its entire point is to highlight the acting, and that's it. The point of this movie is to get the actors Oscars, and the story comes second. I felt nothing watching this movie. Number 12 is May December. This wasn't nominated for Best Picture, but it was nominated for Best Screenplay, so I threw this in here. May December was a movie that I think is decent. I went in with the expectation that I would not like it at all, so this is much better than I thought it would be. The aspect that I liked the most out of this movie is Charles Melton's story. It is so interesting to see a man come to grips with the fact that his relationship with his wife was not forged out of love, and that maybe he was too young at 13 to get into a relationship with a 36-year-old woman. His acting was incredible. The way that he holds his body reminds me so much of a young teenager. When he talks to Natalie Portman about his interest in butterflies and raising them, it also reminds me of how teenagers talk about their hobbies. He has remained at the age the abuse started at and has not been able to heal since then. The scene of him trying to connect with his son on the roof but falling apart because of the weight of everything going on inside him was really great. Even him sleeping with Natalie Portman was interesting, to see how this woman who is embodying his abuser is able to manipulate him. The fact that he wasn't nominated for Best Supporting Actor is a crime. He should have won as well, not just be nominated. And I do still stand up by that. However, I think that the story with Natalie Portman isn't quite as strong as Charles Melton's story. Her scenes are chilling and well written. However, they just don't feel as strong as Charles Melton's story. I really didn't like the soundtrack at all. It felt so different than what the movie was trying to be. It was overly campy. It made the movie feel like a Lifetime movie. If that was the intention, then I truly do not understand the decision behind that choice. I didn't like that the filter that they put on the shots, it was distracting and didn't contribute anything. There were some plot points that just didn't go anywhere, like Charles Melton flirting with that girl from his butterfly group, or the fact that Georgie, Julianne Moore's son from her first marriage, was reporting back to her about everything he talked to Natalie Portman about, even though he talks about how much he hates her. Overall, not a bad movie, but not one that I necessarily remember or recommend to others. The fact that it was submitted as a comedy makes no sense. This movie was not a comedy in the slightest sense. To Die For is the comedy version of an older woman preying on kids. I saw reviews of this movie calling it hilarious, and I truly do not understand that at all. If I had 2 nickels for every time I watched a movie this year that made me want to watch a 90s movie that was the same story but better, I have 2 nickels. Those 2 movies are Saltburn with Talented Mr. Ripley and May December with To Die For. Although I do think that May December would have been better as a more grounded drama than the comedy that To Die For achieves. Number 11 is The Zone of Interest. The Zone of Interest is an interesting movie to come out in the same year as Oppenheimer. We are in a year of reflection about World War II between Godzilla and Oppenheimer. And Zone of Interest, and to extent, The Boy and the Heron. Filmmakers this year really decided to take a more unconventional approach to depicting the horrors of World War II from many different perspectives. The Schindler's List type of movie has been made before this year, that they were more original with how they did it, focusing on other perspectives outside of just the Jewish one. The Zone of Interest is a movie that looks at the banality of evil and how the German people were able to live with what they did. This movie looks at the people who perpetrated this horror and how normal they were. the day-to-day goals that made the overall horror become lost. For Oppenheimer, the audience forgets too. You get caught up in the building of the bomb and achieving the goal, and then it comes crashing down, the reality of what the bomb is. We also never see the actual event because it isn't necessary. In the zone of interest, we never forget what is going on. We hear the gunshots, the screams, and see the smoke coming up. But the focus is on the day-to-day normal activities of this German family. The kids have no idea what's going on. It's their normal life. Sandra Hüller steals the clothes and the makeup of the Jews who have died. The husband is actively trying to kill as many Jews as possible, and yet his job seems very bureaucratic and normal. What's also interesting is that you see other houses in the neighborhood, and it's clear that they aren't the only family living like this. Many German families lived like this because a lot of the camps were built in very normal neighborhoods. Sandra Hüller transforms in this movie. She's completely different from Anatomy of a Fall, obviously, but her whole body moves different, and she's speaking German here, but still crazy. You also see how used to everything Sandra Hüller is, and how her mother, who definitely agrees with what's happening, is still jarred by all the gunshots and horror that she hears. And it becomes too much for her, which is the normal reaction. Which, side note, Sandra Hüller's hair is bonkers. I didn't know that was a style back then, but still crazy. When she decided to keep the family near Auschwitz after her husband gets transferred, I almost felt bad for the husband over his wife's vanity keeping them there instead of keeping the family together. But then you see the flames from Auschwitz and you're like, never mind. I don't feel bad for her anymore. And then you see him sleep with the other woman and you're like, oh, double never mind. I also like the conducting scene better here than in Maestro. The conducting scene here had more to say about the world than Maestro ever did. Another thing that I enjoyed is the camera work here. The camera is always still, never moving. It seems to reflect the almost inhuman coldness of the Haas family. This is a difficult movie to rank because it's not exactly enjoyable. You don't really think, wow, this is a movie I love. So I'm putting it lower because it's not a movie I'd like to watch again, nor necessarily one that I enjoyed. But it is absolutely important and effective. This doesn't diminish that effectiveness. This is my list, so I'm ranking just based on how much I liked the movie. And this one really isn't one that I liked per se. This isn't because it's a war movie. There are war movies I love, like 1917 and Jojo Rabbit. It is good, just not one that I love. I think the reason is that it is kind of one note. The banality of evil is a strong theme, but that's really the only one that we see. By the end, I was hoping for something else, but we don't really get it. The point of the movie was to show that one theme in its entirety, but because of that commitment, it doesn't remain as effective all the way throughout. You just keep seeing this family live happily with the smoke and the gunfire the whole time. And by the end, you're like, okay, I get it. Because by that point, that's the whole movie. And although maybe that's also the point, movies about the Holocaust shouldn't be entertaining or tell a story in the same way. I don't know. All I know is that I wasn't quite as affected the whole time. The sound design is insane, though. Extremely well done. The ending was really interesting. With the women cleaning Auschwitz and the museum today, life continues no matter the tragedy. Regular life in the face of horrors happens even today. That was actually one of my favorite parts of the movie. Really interesting. This movie was critical of the cleaners, though, which I didn't really love. It seemed to say that they are evil too for being normal in the face of horror on that scale. It seemed to say that everyone is evil. Compartmentalization is evil. I don't really agree with that as an idea, but it is a point well argued here. I have a lot to argue about my point of view about that idea of the compartmentalization of being evil, which I won't put here as that would distract from the movie, but just know I feel differently. I was a little confused about the scene of the husband almost puking a couple times. I'm not totally sure what that was. It seemed like to be like the horror of what he was doing and what his thought process had become, thinking of how to gas a room full of German soldiers, has physically turned his stomach, even if he morally agreed with it. Not sure if that was the point, and again, not necessarily a point I agree with, but again, well argued. I don't think that Jonathan Glazer wanted to humanize the husband at all, but at the end it seemed like he kind of did. Glazer is very critical of everyone in this movie. The Haas family, even the children, the cleaners, and by extension, you, the audience. Everyone is evil for not feeling the horror of what happened, which I feel is unfair. But again, the point of this movie isn't to be fair. It is to show that evil is everywhere and in everyone, to take an unflinching and focused view on the evil of everyone involved in the Holocaust, from the officers to his wife, to their children, to the cleaners 80 years later. Everyone is complicit in some way of compartmentalizing the evil that they face. And Jonathan Glazer is very critical of that. And again, while I don't agree with that perspective, he did argue the point well here. So I can't get too mad at that, but it does prevent me from enjoying the movie completely. I will say I had a lot to think about and a lot to digest with this movie, which is a good thing. Never understood what was going on in the black and white scenes. Those were also really confusing. Was it a Jewish woman, a servant, a neighbor? I don't know. Overall, I have a lot of conflicting ideas and feelings about this movie. I will say, if you're not deep in this shit, then this wouldn't be a World War II movie that I would necessarily recommend, but it is still a movie that I'm glad I saw. Number 10 is American Fiction. Okay, so the fact that this one is as low as it is doesn't reflect how I feel about it. Any of the movies from this point forward could win Best Picture, and I wouldn't be mad about it. This was just a really good year with a lot of movies that I liked, so some had to be disproportionately low. From this point forward, all the movies I would give a 4 out of 5 to or higher. Follow me on Letterboxd. That's my username. And American Fiction was much better than I thought it was going to be. The title doesn't exactly inspire me to think that it's a good movie. I hadn't really seen any trailers for it. I was going in blind, and I was very pleasantly surprised. This movie was really funny. There were moments that had me laughing out loud in the theater. I really enjoyed the family drama that was going on at the same time. It felt really genuine and well made. The sets were beautiful. The music was great. I was a little iffy on the ending at first because it leaves things kind of open ended. But I thought that the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. It's a satire, and that doesn't make you roll your eyes at any point, and it is genuinely really clever. Sterling K. Brown and Jeffrey Wright were both really great. I found their story to be really compelling. You think this movie will be boring based on the title, but it really isn't. Genuine recommendation. Please watch this. Upon reflection, I think I would put this movie higher up on my list. But it's really hard because there was a lot of really good movies that year. But yeah. Okay, number 9 is The Holdovers. The Holdovers is a really wonderful movie. It felt like a movie that would have been made in the 90s. It would have been a cult classic. Something similar to Dead Poet Society, even though that movie was much more tragic than this one. It is very funny, it's well made and heartwarming, and it's a coming of age story. It focuses on the main character, Tully, played by Dominic Sessa, and his relationship with his teacher, Paul Giamatti, as they are forced to spend Christmas together at the school. The bond they form as they get to know one another is really heartwarming. This is genuinely one of the best Christmas movies ever because it is a real movie that takes place at Christmas. Those are pretty rare to come by. Paul Giamatti is really great in this movie. He's so funny and charming. The arc that he goes on to open himself up to others is really great to watch. Dominic Sessa is great too, and I wish he had gotten a nomination as well. This movie is just a really good time to watch. You will laugh, you might even cry. It's a true, solid, great movie. Number 8 is Poor Things. I liked Poor Things. I thought Emma Stone was really excellent in it. You are literally watching her grow up, going from a baby to a whole woman, and she does a fantastic job showing that. I really liked the sets and atmosphere. Everything was really beautiful. The outfits were great as well. I did think that this movie was a little too long. I was really starting to feel the length by the end of it. I wish it had been like 15, 20 minutes shorter. I really liked the story of Emma Stone taking control of herself. She is constantly trying to be trapped or tamed by the men in her life, and watching her become her own person is really great. I think her taking control is shown in 3 ways. With Willem Dafoe and Rami Youssef, she becomes independent by becoming equals with them. Mark Ruffalo loses his mind. She gains violent control over her ex-husband. The more I sat with this movie, the more I liked it as well. As I thought about the themes and how it was executed, I really liked it. My mom would disagree with me, but I feel like the movie's take on feminism and the way that it gives its main female character an arc of agency is really interesting. Bella discovers her body before she discovers her mind, and when the two finally are on the same level, she has become a strong, independent, smart person. It wasn't my favorite of the movie of the year, but I did like it a lot. Number 7 is Killers of the Flower Moon. We are in a year with 2 absolutely legendary directors are making movies that feel really self-reflective about their careers as a whole and how their movies will be remembered. Scorsese's last 2 movies have been really self-reflective about his career as a whole. The Irishman spends its first 3 hours being much like other Scorsese gangster movies. It was good, entertaining. It centered around a selfish man making selfish decisions and being successful in his career, getting money, power, and influence. The last half hour of The Irishman was my favorite part of the movie because it shows the man who sacrificed his family so that he could have what he wanted, and he ends up old, alone, and in a nursing home with nothing. Feels so much more reflective about where people end up in life. Now that Scorsese has this perspective on his own life of being old, he can translate that life experience into his movies. And when he was younger, he made movies like Goodfellas, which certainly still punished Ray Liotta for his actions. It does not have the perspective of age. The Irishman does, and it gives such a cool perspective that we don't think about. Then this year, he came out with Killers of the Flower Moon, a movie that is much harsher towards the gangsters that are the main characters than any of his other movies in this genre. Ernest is seen to be completely stupid and easily manipulated. His uncle is cruel, but also not quite as smart as other gangsters. But again, the ending of this movie is self reflective about age in relation to these crimes. Scorsese himself comes out and tells the audience that these men did horrible crimes and basically got away with it. They were in prison for a small amount of time, but then they had regular lives outside of the crimes. And when Molly died, the murder of her family was not mentioned. A tragedy that completely changed her life, killed her mothers and sisters, and is not mentioned in her death. And Scorsese himself draws explicit attention to this. These movies at the end of his life are able to see the full picture for what matters in life. And he does this by pushing his characters with this knowledge and showing the audience this perspective as well. The movie itself is also very well made. You are questioning Ernest's intentions for a while, if he actually loves his wife or not. The slow build of everything getting worse and worse, ending in the explosion of Molly's sister's house, which led to the gangsters getting caught, is really cool. While this movie isn't quite as tense as Oppenheimer, at least for me, it is still a very tense movie where you aren't sure if the bad guys are going to get punished. And then you think, oh, they were, and they went to jail. And then Martin Scorsese himself comes on the screen to tell you that they did not have the ending that they should have. And simultaneously draws attention to the commodification of the tragedy, even this movie itself. I loved Killers of the Flower Moon, definitely one of my favorite Scorsese's. I enjoyed it a lot. Number 6 is Anatomy of a Fall. Anatomy of a Fall is a deeply interesting movie. It is extremely well written and acted. I had heard praise for Sandra Hüller before I watched this movie. God damn, her and his son kill it. He is absolutely fantastic. And the dog is a really good actor too. I will keep this spoiler free, but after you watch the movie, you will know what I mean. As someone who has no idea how the French judicial system works, I was very surprised by how this court case went down. When it started, I was like, yes, a trial. I know how those go. And then multiple times I was like, you can do that? That's allowed in France? Their court cases are so much more casual than ours. It was strange at first, but you pick up on what the main ideas are. This is such an interesting way to look at a long-term relationship. I saw someone say that Marriage Story has nightmares of Anatomy of a Fall, and that is totally correct. Both movies have their big argument scene with similar ideas behind them, but where Marriage Story veers towards the extreme, every day I wake up and I wish you were dead, Anatomy of a Fall takes a far more realistic approach. The way emotions escalate is very realistic. The way they talk to each other and express themselves is so natural and understandable that you empathize with both of them. This movie really excels at ambiguity. There are so many questions that are extremely deliberately left in the air that it makes the audience figure out what is going on. It's not like there isn't an answer. The answer is there. It's just up to you to figure out what it is. This movie doesn't hold your hand. We are meant to have a limited perspective on what happened that day. This movie hinges on the ambiguity and unknown of real life. The fact that my mom hasn't seen it as Criminal, this is perfect for her. She has since watched it and loves it. Okay, so I'm going to do the next three spoiler filled because I have thoughts on the ending. If you liked what I said and want to watch the movie, please skip the next 3 slides that I have and come back when you have seen it. Did Sandra do it? Honestly, I don't think so. I'm not sure that he killed himself either. There were some points where I was like, maybe she had affairs, which reminded me a lot of Michael Peterson, if you are familiar with that case. Someone who cheats on their spouse doesn't necessarily mean that they killed them. No murder weapon was found in either case either. The scene at the end with Daniel is fascinating. I watched him testify a second time at the trial, and I believed him. We never get bits of flashback except in certain key moments. The argument, the vomit, and Samuel driving Daniel and Snoop to the vet. In the argument, we hear and see everything until the end. Did the physical part actually go down as Sandra said? I don't know. The vomit we know to be factual. There was aspirin in there, and we see the empty containers in the trash. Then on the drive to the vet, we hear Daniel's voice saying what Samuel says in the memory. When I watched it, I thought it was done to remind us of the fact that Daniel is testifying. And then in that moment when Sandra comes home and Daniel said, I was afraid you were coming home, she said, I was afraid to come home. And then he hugged her. And the way that he hugged her, I had the thought, did he lie? Did the memory with his dad actually happen? I was looking on Letterboxd. You can see, I can send the review to anyone who wants it after I watched the movie to see what other people said. And I saw someone else say that, of course, Daniel lied. We only get his account of the events with his dad. That never happened. He knew the court wasn't convinced by his experiment with Snoop, so he added the lie to cement it, and that person is completely right. I believe Sandra is innocent, and I believe Daniel told the lie as a way to make sure that she can come home. He chose the way that he believed the events transpired and had the story lock the jury into what he already believed. Throughout the trial, Daniel learns things about his parents that he had no idea about previously. He is a kid having to navigate the way that adults speak and act around each other without a guide as to not influence his testimony. So over time, Daniel learns. He picks up on what's important and how the people in the trial talk to each other. He has two interpretations and he has to determine which one is true. Either his mother is a murderer or his father, who he is closer to and speaks his language, committed suicide. Both are ugly and not what he wants. However, he decides that the narrative that he will go with is that his father killed himself. Whether it's because he believed it to be true or because he did not want to leave the other parent that he had left, I don't know. But the fact that there was the choice that he makes is significant. It is indicative of how he learned and changed over the course of the movie. Sandra falls from grace over the course of the movie as her dirty laundry is very publicly aired, and Daniel chooses to see his parents as complicated, flawed people. But he also sees Sandra as his mother. He forgives her for what she may or may not have done and saves her. Daniel's actor definitely should have gotten nominated for an Oscar. What the fuck? He's so young. He's very good. Number 5 is Oppenheimer. Okay, if I were to bet money, I'd say this one will win Best Picture. It did, and that is absolutely deserved. This is an incredible achievement of filmmaking. Oppenheimer is an absolutely fantastic movie. I'm not sure if a movie has ever pounded into me the weight of human life more effectively than this one. We do not see anyone die in this movie as a result of the atomic bomb, and yet I still felt such an insane sense of anxiety and tension knowing what was coming. The scene where Oppenheimer addressed the crowd full of people and steps to the corpse is one of the most tense and affecting scenes I have ever watched. It truly churned my stomach to see how the people celebrated Oppenheimer's accomplishment as he began to realize what he'd actually done. Christopher Nolan is the master of tension. So many of his previous movies really effectively have great buildups. The Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar, Dunkirk are all movies that grab you by the throat and really don't let go. The Dark Knight especially is a masterclass in tension. But Oppenheimer is the most tense that I have ever felt watching one of his movies. Oppenheimer made me genuinely extremely anxious, and I mean that as a positive. The movie kept building attention to this catharsis of the bomb, and then you're forced to sit with the effects of what is done without ever seeing the violence of the event. The music is the key in this tension that never lets up. This movie is extremely well done and very well acted. I started to feel its length by the end of the movie, but I still loved it. It is an extremely well directed and acted movie as well, where every single famous person ever is in it, and they all really want to impress Chris Nolan. I love the contrast between the black and white scenes with the color scenes, where the color scenes are from Oppenheimer's perspective and the black and white scenes are from Strauss's perspective. That's obviously not the first time that Christopher Nolan has had half of his movie in black and white and color, but it's still used very effectively here. I loved this movie. It was so anxiety inducing and had a real vice grip on me. Cillian Murphy should and will win Best Actor for this movie, and he did. Number 4 is Barbie. One idea that I have been thinking about a lot is the difference between movies that are good in a way that hits your soul and movies that are good in an objective way. Sometimes there is overlap, but I think that there's definitely a difference between the two, and I found a way to describe it. Sometimes movies will hit your head, and sometimes they will hit your heart. Movies that hit your heads are ones that you watch and you go, yep, that is an Oscar caliber movie. Not necessarily one you enjoy, but one that you can acknowledge is very good and well made. Something like The Fabelmans from last year, or even Oppenheimer or Killers of the Flower Moon, though I like the latter two much more. These are movies that you watched and you're like, hell yeah, those are objectively good movies. Well written, well acted, well directed. And there are movies that hit your heart. Barbie did that for me this year. It is such a personal story about girlhood that shot me in the chest full speed. When Barbie tells the old woman that she's so beautiful after observing the little joys of life, or showing the montage of real women connecting with each other through their lives, all hit me in a place that is difficult to describe. It hit my heart. I remember watching with Claire, Karsten, and Keisha and going back home only to have them leave again and for me to cry for like an hour because of how hard it hit my heart. Greta Gerwig has done that for me before, and I'm sure she will continue to. The one that hit my heart, this one hit my heart because of how it connected with me personally. Other movies can do that without me feeling personal connection to it. Movies like Pride and Prejudice or The English Patient that tell these beautiful epic love stories that I obviously can't relate to, but hit my heart nonetheless. I think that movies that hit your heart are the ones that stay with you for years after the fact. I absolutely loved Barbie. Watching this movie in a packed theater on a Tuesday night with my friends and having the whole crowd laugh and cry together is a theater experience that I would put on the same level as Endgame. Girls dressing in pink to go to the theater was such a wonderful experience and camaraderie. Barbie is a movie that will become a new classic that I will show to my theoretical children. Number 3 is The Iron Claw. This one and the one ranked above it are incredibly close in their placement. Here, Ask Me Tomorrow and their placement may have switched. Okay, so I know that this is the Oscar presentation and this movie didn't get any nominations, but truly I see that as a crime. It is nominated in my heart, so I'm including it here. The Iron Claw is a movie that has stayed with me for long after I watched it. As I watched it, I was like, oh, I know what's going to happen. I won't cry. And then I cried a normal amount during the movie. Then I got home, saw Claire, and burst into tears and told her how much I loved her, and we talked until 3 in the morning. Zac Efron is really excellent here. The fact that he isn't getting any nominations is a travesty. I absolutely loved this movie. It centers around these big muscular men, but focuses so much more on the softness and their emotions. It doesn't show a lot of the violence in their lives because the movie isn't about being gratuitous or over the top. The focus is how the characters feel about that violence. The ending is absolutely fantastic. The scene of 4 of the brothers reuniting in the afterlife was deeply moving, especially as it is juxtaposed against how Kevin is alone. He isn't a brother anymore. A deeply emotional tragedy that didn't just make me feel miserable, it just moved me in a way that made me feel so strongly for these brothers. I saw a joke on Letterboxd that this is Little Women for Men, and I truly feel that that is an accurate comparison. Little Women is about sisterhood, femininity, and the relationships between women, and The Iron Claw is about brotherhood and taking a deep look at the masculinity that was imposed on them by their father. And despite that, the brothers have a true bond between all of them that is the core of this movie. I thought the pacing was great. Scenes felt slow enough that you could really feel the weight of them, but I never thought, gee, when is this movie going to be over? Its acting absolutely shines through, but everything else is really top notch. I wasn't expecting to be quite as blown away by this movie, but I really loved it. Okay, number 2 is Godzilla Minus One. Godzilla Minus One was a fantastic movie. I don't know why I said minus 0. It's minus 1. Uh, um, it tells a really great story about war, trauma, moving on, and how to live with ourselves. I loved the opening scene where we are introduced to Shikishima and how he does not die at the end of the war. Then we see Godzilla, and he absolutely seems very scary. He kills almost everyone at the outpost and then leaves. I love how we see Shikishima meet Noriko and take her and In and Akiko, becoming a family, but at the same time, Shikishima keeps both of them at arm's length. We see their lives improve slowly as Shikishima gets a job collecting old bonds from the war, allowing him a steady stream of income. And their homes and lives improve over 2 years. And then Godzilla is back, and I felt so sad for them. I was really invested in the human drama of Shikishima trying to move on from the war, but having him abandoning his post. By having him abandoning his post and Godzilla haunting him. Godzilla himself looked and sounded great. He especially sounded great. His roar was so satisfying to hear. I loved how Godzilla himself was a metaphor for the trauma and war, and that through Shikishima choosing to live by not killing himself and flying the plane into Godzilla's mouth, he has a full arc where he can finally accept that he's alive and move on with that. And when he finds out that Noriko is alive, and he is overcome with joy to see her because he now has the ability to move on from the war with the people he loves. Godzilla was a force of nature in this movie. He represents the destruction of the war coming back to haunt these people. Godzilla also gives the people who fight against him an ability to get closure on their trauma of the war because it actually gives them a fight that is justified. When Captain is talking to Doc, he says, look at how happy all these men are. They know they could die, but they feel so happy that they get to fight in a war worth fighting, with the goal to protect their families and country, with leaders who actually want them to survive. I also know nothing about Godzilla, as the only previous Godzilla movie I had seen was the 2014 American one. So when I saw Godzilla Regenerate, I turned to Anna, and we were both like, oh shit. I watched this movie 3 times in theaters, which shows you that I'm serious. I loved it more each time I watched it. The story is simple and executed very well. In a perfect world, this movie would have been nominated for Best Picture and Best Score, but I will settle for Best Visual Effects. I loved this movie, and I think it has a lot of heart and a lot to say about Japan and Japanese culture. I have since watched this movie a fourth time, and it's still so good. This movie is so good. I love it so much. It just holds a very special place in my heart. But number one, my favorite movie of last year was Past Lives. When thinking about the ranking of the movies for this PowerPoint, I waffled a lot on the placement of movies. But when thinking about what movie would be number one, there was no contest. Past Lives is wonderful. I loved this movie way more than I thought I was going to. It is shot beautifully. The colors really pop in this movie in a way that reminded me of La La Land. Truly, the color blocking is great. I also loved the writing and acting in this. This movie feels so realistic and natural. The way that they talk to each other is relatably awkward and imperfect. There's so much unsaid between Nora and Hae-sung that really shines through in their performances. They look at each other with such love and yearning that it made me feel crazy, which is really interesting about the way that they talk to each other is they talk about surface level things, but you can see in their body language that they wish there was more. This movie had such an interesting take on what ifs. Nora's conflict isn't in whether she is going to leave her husband or not. She's not going to. It's more in the what could her life have been like with Hae-sung? Would she have been happier? What would it have looked like? Her husband's support of her throughout all this is really great as well. He waits for her on the stairs because he knows that this was more important to her than she was letting on. He knows she won't be able to leave, but empathizes with her sadness and supports her. Her husband being so great adds to her conflict because she cannot justify leaving him or her life because they are all great. But she will always be left with the what ifs of her life with Hae-sung. I absolutely love the last scene where she walks Hae-sung to his Uber and it's awkward and quiet because of the weight of everything unsaid is weighing both of them down. Then when he gets in the Uber and she breaks down crying about everything, I just love this movie so much. I am writing this after seeing a movie for the second time in 5 days. What really stood out to me this time around was the writing. I mean, just wow. The conversation that Nora has with her husband in bed when he says, "You dream in a language I don't understand," made me go kind of crazy because that whole scene was just so well written. That scene is the one that cements my love of Arthur and how much he loves Nora. Because you expect the white husband to be an asshole, and they acknowledge that's what you expect. But ultimately, Arthur and Nora love each other and the lives that they made. And that still doesn't stop Nora's sadness about what could have been with Hae-sung. The movie just makes me feel so much. I can feel the love between Arthur and Nora and the different kind of love between Nora and Hae-sung. The fact that this is a very complicated dynamic between the three main characters in this movie, and none of them are jerks, is really incredible. No one is at fault or does anything wrong. They are all just in a situation that leaves things open ended, sorry. And I think that by the end, Nora and Hae-sung get closure about their relationship because they talk about their inyeon and the feelings they have for each other. This is a movie I will think about for the rest of my life. It really made an impact. And also, Nora's outfits, incredible. She looks really good. The soundtrack was awesome too. I loved everything. The soundtrack for this movie was like in my top 10 most listened to albums of the year. So I'm being serious when I say I really love the soundtrack. Overall rankings, how would I compare everything to each other? So, my least favorite movie was Nimona, which is crazy considering how much I disliked Maestro. Then Elemental, May December, Zonometrist, American Fiction, The Holdovers, Poor Things, Killers of the Flower Moon, Anatomy of Fall, Oppenheimer, Barbie, Across the Spider-Verse, The Iron Claw, Godzilla Minus One, The Boy and the Heron, and Past Lives. Yeah, that's kind of what I have to say about all of the ranking. That was me at the moment. Honestly, I would probably change some of these now, but I'm just kind of leaving this, as a testament to what I thought at the time when they were all very fresh in my brain. Okay, that's all, folks. That's all I have. Thank you.